Good morning, everyone. And so today on our Fireside chat, we will be talking about security. According to the UK government's latest cyber security breach survey, 39% of businesses last year reported having some form of cyber attack. Of those, I've been doing a lot of reading, of those, 79% say that the primary intrusion point was through phishing attacks, with a larger portion of those now becoming spear phishing attacks, which is where obviously the attacker spends a lot more time doing their research and specifically trying to attack. 21% of those, which is up on last year actually by about 3%, was those more sophisticated attacks. So that's your traditional DDoS and malware attacks, and of course ransomware we've seen a lot of. What I also found interesting, and part of the reason for today, was that the report also calls out that 85% of those organizations attacked used Microsoft 365, right? Which I guess is no surprise. It's the majority player in the productivity suite, but it's interesting. And more alarmingly was, if you look at some of the reports that Microsoft share, then Microsoft stated last year that only about a quarter of their commercial customers are actively using the security products that they've bought. They've invested in the product sets, but they're not using them. So in today's show, we will be talking to our panel, as always, about their security strategy and their perception of the Microsoft security suite, what gaps exist, and how it compares to a more best-of-breed multi-vendor approach, with vendors across the plethora of different categories. There's 40 or so security categories out there now. So keen to understand how those are running. And then finally, we'll hear from Jose, who's one of the cloud solution architects at Microsoft, who's going to give us a whistle-stop tour of Microsoft's comprehensive security approach, as well as answer any questions that we may get from the panel. So I'm Rob Quickenden. I'm the CTO at Sicilian, and today I'm joined, as usual, by select members of our customer advisory panel, who will all give you a little wave now, I'm sure. So welcome, everybody. Thank you. So we're going to dive straight in. We are live as usual on LinkedIn and YouTube. So if any of you listeners have any questions, please do pop them in the chat, and we'll endeavour to answer them during the session or at the end. So first question to the panel is, how would you describe the digital security landscape within your organizations today? And I'm going to pick on someone to start with. I'm going to pick on Alex, if that's all right.
Hi, yeah. So I guess you could say it is growing from a security landscape perspective. We have a dedicated InfoSec team that works very closely with my IT team. And being a Microsoft solutions house, we have the E5 license, or the M365 E5 license. So we're using their tools as a means to detect and protect us. The biggest issues we're finding at the moment really are capacity, ensuring that we have enough staff to deal with the amount of incidents that are being raised, and being able to treat those properly, and also the governance that goes around it. So having that policy and understanding from our end users of what they should and shouldn't do, and then having the playbooks for my team to actually run through it. The software is fine, the software does its job, but sometimes there's not enough eyes on the software to actually go in and fix the issues before they could potentially become bigger issues. But it seems to do everything that we want, and it's more about learning for us and training our end users. The more secure they can be, or the more understanding they are, the less work we have to do at the end of the day.
Great, thank you. Madassa, what's your security landscape look like within Waverton?
Yes, similar to Alex. I think one of the key drivers behind our strategy has been one to consolidate as many third-party tool sets that we may use. I think naturally there's always a burden on your team to oversee the tools that you've put in place to ensure that the logs that are generated are viewed and monitored, and the false positives are also ticked off. So there's a huge task that's involved. And I guess one of the key drivers behind our approach has been, one, with the move to Microsoft E5 across the estate and the group. In fact, we've effectively also pushed our AV into the cloud using Microsoft Defender. And as a back-end solution, we implemented Microsoft Sentinel. So effectively, all of our logs and events are generated across the estate, Surface devices, desktop servers, are pushed into one central depository, which are then overseen by a dedicated SOC team. And the SOC team that we've used historically used to use another third-party tool, but moved into Sentinel. We were one of the few that joined as a guinea pig, actually, and have been using it ever since. And I think as part of the general oversight across Waverton and the group, it has benefited, because who better to know the threat landscape than Microsoft, given that we are using a Microsoft ecosystem on-prem and also within Azure.
You can see, I can see Jose smiling in the background there. He's going to have an easy task, I think, this afternoon, trying to convince you bunch. But but thanks, Jazz. Welcome. This is your first. This is your first panel. So, did you want to add anything to that?
Not a huge amount to add, really. Like Alex and Madassa, we've got a dedicated information security team. We've, I think, matured in the way in the tools that we select and we use to protect the business, but the education piece, as Alex alluded to, has been key for us in ensuring we get the messaging right across the business. People understand how to protect themselves, how to protect the business. We have regular engagement from that perspective. We do the same kind of phishing simulations that everyone else will do as well, and just trying to ensure people have their guard up and are aware of the threats that are in play at the moment. We have matured. We continue to mature. We try and ensure we're monitoring the threats that are out there and have the right tools in place, as well as, like I said, the right awareness across the business.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting one, isn't it? I think I mean, it sounds like all of you are really good examples of Microsoft customers, right? Essentially, that have invested in the stack and are driving down that consolidation route. Have any of you struggled to do that? Have you had issues with shadow IT from users? Have you had issues with investments in other product sets, or have you found things that simply just you're not ready to migrate, you're not ready to trust in the Microsoft cloud yet?
I think we've kind of had a little bit of that kind of issue. We're only actually 3 customers, so we don't quite get the full feature set that the rest of the guys get. But we've had problems in resourcing, in that we've only really moved to 365 in the last few years, and we're looking at Azure data and lots of other things. And we need those same skill sets and same resource to look at the Microsoft security products we have within our licensing, to look at replacing other features. Like, I think early this year, end of last year, Defender Plan 1 for endpoint fell into our licensing package.
Yep.
And it's like we've got our endpoint coming up for renewal early next year, and it's trying to get people lined up to look to see if it is suitable to replace what we currently have, and trying to consolidate some of those things. And at the moment, we're still quite heavily on premise with some of those kind of older security solutions around them, but trying to move as quickly as possible to some of the Microsoft security, especially how quickly we're moving to SaaS and cloud applications, and moving away from that such heavy on-premise lean, and even things like single sign-on with conditional access policies. Having that functionality now to sit in front of SaaS applications is a game changer for us, really.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, no, thank you. That's a good view. I think. Sorry, Roland.
Hey, I was just going to say we're probably as I think smallest of the businesses on here, we're also in a similar position in some ways. We've actually got even less of the Microsoft licenses. Most of our users are on business standard as our sort of office licenses, and then we've got EM plus S E3 to give us some of the security applications and the ability to roll out Intune profiles and things like that. We do have some users on E3, but actually one of the things that, to be honest, we need to get a better understanding of is what we're missing out on by not having E3. Is there much, if with the combination of licensing that we do have, and then what are the benefits of some of those things, and how do we best use them? So I think there's just a little bit of a gap there that we need to have a look at, candidly.
Yeah, that's probably something that's our job to help you with, right? So I'll take that away. But no, thanks. That's a good one. If we think about the landscape and what's changed certainly over the last everyone's talking about the change from COVID, right? But the way in which we work now and these threats that we talked about at the beginning, what do you see as the biggest security risks today and moving forward, right? For your organisations, and how well trusted and I guess aware from your point, Roland, would you say the Microsoft 365 security stack is in helping you to stay protected? You've kind of answered that question already, Roland, in the fact that I think you've got a bit of an education piece right in there. But for everybody else, how where are the risks and where do you see 365 security helping?
I think
I'm happy to jump. Sorry, I'm happy to jump in. Jose cool. Probably loves L&Q because we use Microsoft Security for most things. We do complement it with some other products. So we use similar to Mandasa, we use Sentinel. We've been an early adopter of that, and that's been fantastic. So being able to see pretty much every part of the network and aggregate information and see what's challenging for us is really good, particularly when we've got people very spread out in different places. We use BitLocker, so we can make sure that devices are secure. We use Defender from a AV and a malware point of view. We also use Azure Information Protection as well to classify data and look at maybe potential data loss alerting and things like that. So that's been really good. I think the challenge that we've probably had is devices all over the place and having patching and all things like that in good shape. I think that's a key part to protecting our information. I think the other thing, just in terms of our sector, which has probably been there for a while in other sectors, is around things like phishing, ransomware. So this is becoming far closer to us as a housing association sector at the moment. And I think that's the challenge there, which is good in a way, is that our exec are really interested now in information security, in cyber. Every time we have an incident, they are asking if it's a security incident, which is good because we want them to pay an interest. We want them to be there to support us when we need their help. And we want them to be thinking about what it means to business. But at the same time, it just means we need to be on our game. Thankfully the tools that we've got are good, but I think that they're always evolving. And to Roland's point is, trying to get value from all the new stuff that's coming in is tricky when we're focusing on trying to keep the bad guys out.
Yes, I think it's been top table for a long time. I think it certainly is within our organisation, but it's still, I would say, for many, always was about oh, you got it, that's fine, what product do you want? And I think when we talk about things like human powered ransomware and things now, much more of these targeted accounts, I think it's definitely I'm definitely seeing, and we know from the global shortages, I guess, around the huge demand out there for security teams, teams of people, new security consultants that can actually help do this stuff. Because you're right, the technology is great, but you still need the people to educate users. I think there's still a massive gap in educating users. I think users still can be careful with the words I use, but people will click on anything, and I think people tend to be more nervous at home about clicking on things than they probably are in work, because they feel there's protection that's there to gauge them.
There's definitely a behaviours thing. We've set up a security champions group to try and get messages across the organisation, and we also work with other housing associations on in a collective intelligence forum. So we share kind of information around cyber awareness, best practice, and intelligence. And then if one of us has an issue, then we've got other people that are there to lean in and help where we need to. So we're trying to create these groups that can help just get messages out and share knowledge.
Fab. Anyone else? It's Jazz, from your sector, right? From legal. Where are the biggest risks for you? What are you seeing at the moment?
Well, I think legal and professional services in general, I understand, is now most targeted from a ransomware perspective, whereas it's always been the financial services sector previously. So the data, protecting our data, protecting our clients' data. That's our biggest challenge across the sector now. And it's Microsoft provide a plethora of tools. It's understanding what those tools do, understanding how those tools complement what else we have across our stack, and how those tools work in collaboration, and how they ultimately will protect our business, and how they'll help us educate our users as well in protecting our business and our data. But like for one of the biggest challenges for me, and I think for many with the Microsoft stack now, is it's constantly evolving, it's constantly developing, and it's understanding what sits within things like EMS now, what sits with your M5 licensing, what sits elsewhere, and how do those various security products all work together, and how do they interweave?
Yeah, so it feels like a bit of a common theme. One will probably Jose will pick up a little bit later on. What about insider? What about insider risk? Is anyone doing anything around, protecting from, internal IP theft? And we've got such a high volume of churn rate, right? Generally, in all our industries have got high churn, generally compared to before. Is that a big risk? Is that something you're dealing with?
We have some alerting around data loss. So if we see large amounts of data moving, we have flags that are in place that alert us to that, so we can check it out. And sometimes it's nothing to worry about. Other times it is, but it at least gives us some visibility. And then the other thing where we have levers, particularly potentially high-profile levers in the organisation that we're aware of, we put a flag on them just to make sure that things are being done in the right way in terms of the levers process, disabling accounts, but there's nothing unscrupulous going on as well.
Anybody else? Anyone looking at things like
DLP
inside
piece
risk
can
management
be.
tools? Sorry, Jazz.
I was just going to say, what Paul's talking about with regards to DLP, that can be a challenge in itself, configuring the right tools with the right policies and ensuring that you're just not getting a huge volume of noise, and being able to sift through that and identify the genuine issues within that. So again, that comes down to education, understanding of how to correctly configure and set those tools up. But it's a minefield.
Yeah, I think we had a similar challenge trying to configure our DLP policies, and started initially just flooding our IG team with non-stop reports that they couldn't see the wood for the trees. But I think now that they've got there, having that visibility has been a game changer for them. Even though with us being E3s, it's all quite manual. Just even being able to see that is a completely different ballpark from where we were 2-3 years ago.
Yeah, it's kind of where I always see people often say to our teams, our licensing teams, that they'll say, what's the difference between E3 and E5, and which is a very generic view, right? And I'll get shot for this now that we've got Microsoft on the call. But the way I always used to describe it is, if you want real security, you need the security stack that's in E5. You don't necessarily need E5, but you need the E5 security tools. But also, what I find is that most of the stuff is there within E3, but it is quite manual. It's when you want the automated stuff to happen, whether that's DLP and automatic labeling and those kind of things, they're the things that require that higher level license. That's typically where I see that jump. But of course, it's a big jump in cost, right? So that, you're right, really understanding the estate and working out what products you can take out and remove is really key. And I guess that kind of builds on to the next point I was going to touch on, really, which is complexity, right? And I'm going to read a couple of quotes, right, because I can't remember these off the top of my head. But Forrester say, and they always use long, complicated words, so forgive me. But so Forrester's statement in their security report this year was, in a world of highly distributed data and disappearing parameters, today's enterprises are struggling not only with the expanding threat landscape, but the growing solutions landscape and the associated complexity and cost. Now, in contrast, that Gartner say that the average organization, and they don't really state what they class as average, but they say the average organization has over 70 different security products from 35 different vendors, which is wow. I'd be interested to see what you've got. But in contrast, and again, contrast to that, having too many tools addressing those point solutions and no holistic view, and I guess some of you have touched on that today, again, that point Microsoft reported on, in that only a quarter of their customers are actively using the core products. So when I look at that, to me, that kind of says that, silos and multi-vendor product solutions, which is what used to happen before, the black boxes that protected against that, and the box that did that, and the tool that did that, are kind of the bane of security operations, right? They're not only probably more expensive than the suite, but if we don't understand what's in the suite, then we can't displace those products. There's feature overlap, and there's lack of integration, and as you say, sometimes overlapping products, right, all the way through. I think as well, there's also a viewpoint that Microsoft 365 is inherently insecure. If you look at all the, I was going to flash a slide up on this, but didn't get time to do one. But if you look at all the vendors out there, most of them I've never heard of, that are all promising to sell solutions that provide mail security for Exchange Online or provide DLP tools for things. A lot of them targeted at Microsoft, is quite interesting. So it is extremely complicated landscape, and it's no wonder that this topic is popular, but also the fact that we're struggling to get the right people and understand, just to understand what the core products that you've all invested in can do. So I guess on that, how much of that do you agree with? I mean, some of you have standardized on the 365 estate pretty much, but do you think it's complicated? Do you think there is definitely a drive to consolidate?
I would like to think there is a drive to consolidate. I can see that depending on the type of organization and how, to a degree, clued up the senior leaders in the business are, it can be very easy to be sold multiple systems that kind of overlap and do the same thing. I think you need an engaged and clued up IT team to understand that, and to your point, understand the limits of what the existing software can do. I mean, we make a point of, we may be, the Microsoft ecosystem is our primary security stack. The InfoSec team may have a couple of other applications that do very unique, specific things. If I'm honest, we could probably replicate that in the Microsoft stack, but we always make a point of, before someone wants to introduce something new, we validate whether we can already do that thing. And for us, it's the reason we may not have done that thing is we simply don't have the capacity to introduce that thing. So I can agree with that statement, and I think it's a little bit of the, forgive me, the channel sort of selling as much as they can to try and to do that. But I think if you have an engaged IT team and leaders of the business that trust the IT team and listen to them, I think you can offset that to a degree. But you have to know what it is you want in the first place. And I would always argue, don't let a salesman try and sell you something that you clearly don't want yourself. Get me wrong. But I think it's absolutely valid, because otherwise you'll end up with all sorts of stuff, and then every year you're buying new stuff when actually you already have it, or you have that capacity.
And there is a massive blur as well, because as you say, it must be, it's not for me to say, whether going all in on Microsoft is the best answer or not. It's certainly what we tend to see with customers that are very heavily 365 orientated, right? And I think Microsoft do a phenomenal job of investing in the right places. I mean, they what is it you guys spend now, 4 billion a year or something in security R&D? I mean, it's massive, but
20 billion. For the next 5 years. For
no, I did my maths right then. 4 billion a year. There we go. So I'm good at maths. I was teaching my kids the 5 times table this morning, so I know it. So, but I think also, where organisations are not predominantly all Microsoft, right? So where there is AWS and Google in the mix, and Slack and other products like that, does this approach still work? I'm kind of going to ask you that question back, Alex. I know you've got quite a big bunch of Slack users still within the organisation. Or are we happy with that kind of multi-cloud approach?
I think it depends on your usage needs. The reason we have it was for a very valid reason back in the day. Now that reason doesn't exist anymore, to have that multi-vendor approach. But we now have to tread carefully, because you're removing a system that people are using and like, potentially. I think it's slightly different if you're trying to remove security systems, because at the end of the day, you want to simplify and make things easier on the security side, because there's lots of levers to pull. And the more things you can either automate or reduce down if you're having to do them manually, the better. But on the the Slack and Teams type thing, or multi applications that do the same thing, as long as you can justify the business case for having just one, then the business should go along with that, unless again there's political reasons why they need to stay in place.
Yeah, I'm going to grab a question, if you don't mind, actually, and ask one of you to answer. So there's been a few questions come through the chat. One of them was from Rob. So Rob Walker, thank you for the question. What risk do you see to using and consolidating down to a single vendor for security? Who wants to pick that one up?
Yeah, I think that's a view that our security team had definitely had previously. I think going back a few years, looking at endpoint protection, were potentially when the kind of advent of kind of behavioral based protection came out, and we're looking to roll that into our current endpoint protection. They wanted to go for a different product. Mainly their view was that if one vendor was compromised in some way, you then had those other layers of defense across that multi-vendor approach that I could kind of see at the time. But now the benefits of having it a bit more consolidated and being able to kind of see the interactions between those products, and if you do have an event, being able to kind of trace it the full way back instantly. And I know SIEM can help with some of that, but we're still kind of getting to grips with our SIEM product, and it seems to take a lot of work to be able to do that, whereas if you could do it a bit more natively, it could ease some of that integration and everything else.
And I think that's when you talk about the differences, right, as well, between E3.5 stack is that, detect and response. So it's not just about AV and protection and have I got this and I'm picking up mal alerts and those. And you're right, in that perspective, I think there is definitely a kind of protecting bubbles, right? No one product, no one single vendor can protect you from everything, right? It's all about the layers, isn't it, of protection. I think what's making this, it's not just Microsoft, right? I think any Cisco, I would argue the same for organizations that are investing heavily in the SecureX platform. If that's the strategy that you've gone for, I think when you combine the strength of those products together and they are all talking to each other seamlessly, then understanding that a threat comes in, a 0-day attack might come in via the endpoint through people are still using USB keys, but might come in from some other source or downloaded file or something from the internet. Then how those tools adapt themselves and lock out the rest of the environment or isolate those devices to kind of contain it. So I think the benefits of single vendor are quite strong in that respect. But at the same point, there's obviously a task of using multiple products and joining them together as well. And does that give you better protection than just investing in the one? Yeah, it's interesting. Anyone else got a view on that?
Waynington took a view that previously we used to use multi-vendors for certain monitorings for our outbound communication, specifically around DLP. And I think some of the the third-party tools we use where their specific AI engines did something specific related to some of the data monitoring parameters that we put in place, we wasn't very much as aligned with our initial offering that when it was sold to us. So there's a view that what we did is where we took the view to remove tools such as AI and push it all within Microsoft and configure the rule sets within Sentinel to give us that better output. The other driver behind this was also when staff started to work from home as well. I think now that we've got hybrid working, it's important that we have the correct network set up to ensure that your tools can communicate to the device estates externally. And where we're now quite heavily relying on the cloud, that also made our decision to remove some of these tools off the platforms and just to consolidate them into Microsoft because it's just leveraging the same platforms and communications that we put in place. So I think that was a key driver for us. But I think consolidation for us has very much benefited the team as well, because they're not having to review multiple platforms for the same output. and a lot of our training that we've also offered to our IT team has also been focused around the cloud platform. So it's kind of streamlined, made it slightly more efficient there, and also with our SOC team as well.
Great. We've got another question, which I'm hoping will get answered actually in the next section. So Rakesh, thank you for the question, but we're hopefully going to get this question sort of answered through. What I'm going to do now, if that's okay, everyone, I'm going to hand over to and introduce for everyone on the show to Jose, who's a cloud security solution architect at Microsoft. Jose, would you like to just introduce yourself to for those on the show, tell a little bit about yourself, and then could you just sort of talk through really what you see from Microsoft's standpoint, right, as the main challenges that businesses are facing around security and kind of how that's changed really over the last few years?
Absolutely. Well, thank you very much. First of all, thank you to Cecilian for inviting us. It's an absolute pleasure being here today. This is what I love about these conversations, right? During these conversations, because it's the voice of the customer, right? It's listening to security leaders, sharing their experiences and their journey, how they're getting there, how they're moving to digital transformation. So, of course, everyone's talking about moving to the cloud, improve your security posture, data transformation. But what does that really mean in terms of implementation, and what's the cost of this? So we at Microsoft have identified 4 key challenges that most businesses might encounter with this process. And I'm really glad to hear what you're saying, guys, because it matches what we've got, which means we're listening. So first of all, you have a need of securing all of your digital assets, okay? So you've got applications, identities, devices, platforms across multiple clouds environments, which you have to consolidate, and then you need to understand what's happening, what's going on, and then guess remote work, hybrid work. So how do we make sure that people, employees can access corporate resources from, let's say, personal devices or corporate devices in a secure way without slowing down your workforce? That's the key thing, okay? That's challenge number 1. Then if you think about it, then, as we all said, sometimes the security portfolio of a business, of an organization, is just far too complex. So what's happening is that security leaders are trying to sort of like mix and match security solutions, which can be okay to a certain point, but then you will create a security gap. It will happen at some point because you're not able to see the whole picture sometimes, and sometimes the integration is just not quite right. So this will cost you money and will hinder your growth as a business, and will make it harder for your teams to anticipate any vulnerabilities, to manage risk, or to navigate within a rapidly evolving threat landscape. So that's number 2. And then we have number 3, which is a lack of comprehensive view on the scope and depth of the risks that a business is facing. So cyber criminals, they just don't discriminate, right? They don't care about your size, your industry, your level. They will hit you. If you give them a chance, they will come for you and they will try to make money. And you have to think about risks are not only external, but also internal. So there is a lot to consider. And then data, which keeps growing and growing and growing. And how do I make sure I don't breach compliance, privacy policies, GDPR? I mean, there's no organization that's immune to cyber risks. And then last but not least, and I think one of the key ones, is that there's a massive, huge shortage of talent, okay, in the field. And that's a fact. You can't find qualified people to manage these tools. So you can invest the money, but then are you actually using it to the right extent? To give you some numbers, some statistics, in the United States, for example, for every 2 cybersecurity jobs available, a 3rd job is sitting empty, which means teams are overworked, overwhelmed, or ill-prepared for the increasingly sophisticated challenges that they face every day. So all in all, this fight does not just represent a financial cost, but human cost in time, peace of mind, and increased anxiety. There's a need for digital security. People need to feel safe as a business, as a client, so they can focus on what really matters, which is innovation and growing their business. And that's what I believe that with our solutions and through partners such as Sicilian, we can achieve. So what do you guys think about those 4 key challenges?
I was going to bring up one point that you mentioned actually, which was the the state nation attacks don't care about size or breed, but I think it's really interesting, and I guess Roland, you always tell me how you're the smallest organisation on this panel, so I'm going to pick on you. But the stats around actually the number of smaller businesses that are attacked is quite stifling, right? And I think particularly because and there was a stat I read recently. I think it was like 60% of SMBs, so that's I guess anyone under about 500 seats, that is successfully attacked. I guess they don't just mean to click it, just a ransomware attack that goes nowhere, but fall out of business. And I guess a lot of that comes down to not because they've got more to gain by attacking them, but probably because they feel they're less protected because there's less people in that organization compared to a larger enterprise. I mean, do you see a big increase? Or
I think it is a reality here that if you've got an organization that's only got 100 people in it, where you're struggling to justify having a couple of people in your IT team, even having one full-time information security person is probably beyond what you can do.
Yeah.
And there's only so much of the service that you can completely outsource to someone else. Yeah. And you look at your IT budget, and if you've got an IT budget of £500,000 a year, then actually how much of that can you justify spending on information security?
Yeah.
All of which makes it hard to do, but and I think the problem is that the impact can be just as large as it is for anyone else. If they get in, if you get a breach which results in a fine, if you get a breach which gets out there and affects your public image and your PR and what your clients are starting to say, that can be a real problem, even without thinking about ransoms and ransomware and loss of ability to actually operate as a business. So it's a bit of a tightrope in some ways. I think as soon as you get to be a larger organization, once you've got a 500 person or 1,000 person business, of course you've got an information security team. Of course you can make the case for a decent sized budget. But when every internal function is trying to get budget, it's harder to make the case for information security until it goes wrong.
Yeah, totally.
So it's something that you just have to try and prioritize and manage. I mean, I think it's always foolish in a public forum to say we haven't been attacked. I think we absolutely we have had a few attacks over the last couple of years. To the best of my knowledge, we have managed to avoid every one of them having a serious impact to us. But we have had some scares, and some of those we have been lucky to get away with. I mean, we had an incident a couple of years ago before we'd put multi-factor authentication on properly, where we had a credentials breach, and someone spent a month monitoring emails going to and from our accounts team, and then used that to produce some fake invoices and suggest that people change their banking details. Fortunately, one of our clients rang us up and said, "Oh, this is a bit strange. You haven't told us about changing your banking account." We went, okay, better deal with that then. Got on top of it, found all the other ones that had gone out through the same account that were dodgy. This was, for us, one of those scenarios where a second product was useful. Now, there may well be a way to do this with Microsoft tools as well, but we have Mimecast as an external mail gateway and archive tool, which meant that despite the fact that they had deleted all the emails through Outlook Web Access, so you couldn't see that they'd been sent from the user's account, we were able to see everything through the Mimecast archive. Because it was completely untouchable. There's no way to delete the stuff from there. So that allowed us to be 100% certain we'd picked up everything there. And obviously we were then monitoring where all the attempted logins were and all the other good stuff that we needed to do. So yes, it's out there. Yes, I think it's harder for a small business, but you can stay on top of it. And it's probably one of the areas that does it at times keep me up at night, because there's not a lot I can do about it. The only way I could solve this is to hire 2 people. I could spend 120 grand on salaries, and I could spend another 100 grand on outsourced services. Can I get approval to spend that 220 grand? Not a chance. So I have to live.
Probably not till it happens, right? That's what normally happens, isn't it?
So, yeah.
And I've kind of plugged you again, Jose, right? But I know one of the things that I think is great about cloud technology generally, right, is that typically any organization of any size, right, has got access to the same levels of enterprise tools that that the largest ones have got, right? So I'm kind of plugging you a bit, and this stands for really any cloud service, right? Really, it's one of the great things about cloud. But in sort of the last 10 minutes or so that we've got, Jose, could you kind of give us a bit of a, and I know we didn't want a sales pitch today, right? We talked about that, right? But could you give us a technical pitch, right, on Microsoft's approach to security, right? Microsoft is one of those products that probably 15 years ago you only had a job in security if you had Microsoft products, right, in those days. But obviously the world has changed. So can you give us tell us why Microsoft security is right for everyone?
Absolutely. So we at Microsoft, we have a built-in approach to security and compliance, and our aim is to deliver frictionless experiences that won't slow down your workforce. Right? That's the main thing. Your workforce is key for us because that represents your success. So we are truly dedicated to this, to security, and it's something you mentioned before. We've invested over $20 billion. We pledged $20 billion over the next 5 years for research and development of security, because we believe in what we're doing, and it's only getting better. And that's a reality. It's a proven fact through numbers and statistics. So to give you a few examples of our built-in security, we have multi-factor authentication built in. We have passwordless sign-on, single sign-on for over 1 million apps. So one set of credentials that will allow you to authenticate on all of these applications. Isn't that brilliant? And then without interrupting the end user workflow, right? And it reduces the whole risk of having different passwords and accounts all over the place. We also offer a web-based self-service portal where employees can quickly find access to organizations' business apps in a secure way. And then if we talk about at a very high level, because I know I get very passionate about this, I can talk for hours, but the solutions that we offer. For example, we have Defender for Cloud, so you can bring all of your public vendors into one place, okay, AWS, Google Cloud, and then get your resources in there, run baselines, security assessments. I mean, out of the box, in there. You don't have to build it. It's there for you. So we have Sentinel, pre-built SIEM tool with out-of-the-box integration with almost anything. I had people saying, can I connect my personal firewall into Sentinel from home? Yes, you can. It's that deep and really simple. Defender for Cloud apps for the investigation of users, and then connectivity allows connection from third-party apps as well. So you can see in a full single pane of glass what's going on. You can investigate the user risk, etc. And then Defender for Endpoint, automated investigation and remediation. I've run like ransomware demos for customers, and I show them how the solution, the tool, without touching it, will pick up the attack, it will tell you what's going on, give you a full timeline of all the events, and it will remediate it with full automation. And then if you, for example, use a logic app designer, you've got a playbook in place, then you can add your workflow of what you want to happen. You want to isolate the device, you want to block the user, disable the user, revoke authentication tokens. I mean, everything in one single place. To me, that's just, priceless. And then Endpoint Manager, you can standardize deployments across your full estate. So you leave no gaps, no human error, and you make sure that everything is kept in sync with your business needs. And then I think the cherry on the top of the cake is Azure AD for identity and access management, because here you can set up your conditions and controls that your users will have to meet in order to gain access to your resources. So as you can see, everything it's there for you to use, to take advantage of. We give you the tools. It's up to you guys, of course, to make sure you are using them. Any thoughts?
Yeah, Paul, I think something we've spoken about before. Did you want to ask Microsoft anything?
Yeah, so Jose, I've seen lots of press releases from Microsoft over the last few years around acquisitions in the security space. I know Risk IQ is quite a high-profile one. There's been more recently. Interested to know what those acquisitions maybe mean to Microsoft in terms of their security offering, and whether they'll drop into E3 or E5 at some point in the future.
Okay, sure. In terms of licensing, I don't have that information. That
Sure.
It's get really confidential on what's
You're not
going
a
to happen
salesman
with that. But yeah, so we understand the need to improve our services, and as I said before, we're always listening. So that's why we're looking around, seeing who is doing well, and we're saying, right, we want these people in here. We need this talent. We need, as I said before, there's a shortage of talent. So when you find talent, we are making sure that we are adding that to our ecosystem. Okay, so in terms of development, as I said before, 20 billion is going to keep happening. I can't tell you what happens next, but what I can guarantee you is that it's only going to get better. We've seen it, for example, with Defender for Endpoint. It started with the full support for Windows, but then you didn't get EDR or you didn't get web content filters for macOS, right? And that was like a deal breaker, I would say, at the beginning, because some business will say, no, I've got Mac devices and you can't like properly manage. I'd rather stay with Sophos, McAfee, whatever it is. And that's been tackled now. Now you can fully manage that device, EDR capabilities, everything. So that's the way we're going towards, just making improvements and making everything more compatible, allowing integration and collaboration with other vendors. That's what we want. That's what we want to achieve.
I think what's interesting about a lot of the acquisitions is they're all very, I think Microsoft were probably criticised, 3-4 years ago about being, it's okay as long as it's Microsoft. And I think, do you want to just touch on some of the multi-cloud investments that Microsoft have made around recognizing that, most customers have got a multi-cloud strategy rather than just Azure?
Well, I can't tell you the names. I don't have a list of names right now of companies. I don't know them by heart. But what I can tell you is that at first, we didn't have all of that integration. For example, Defender for Cloud. Now, through one single agent, you can bring all of these resources in there. And there's tech backing up all of this connectivity. That's what I can say in that respect. I don't have the company names, I'm afraid. I can find them for you if you like, for a further session.
No, I think it was more just the Microsoft's approach to security about how that investment is across multi-cloud rather than just about protecting 365 and Azure. Because I think it's a given that who is better to protect your products than yourselves. I've always kind of had that question before about antivirus, right? Well, who better to protect your OS than you?
No, perfect.
But outside of that, where's the expertise lay? Where's the investment in multi-cloud?
No, I get your question now. So our solutions deliver comprehensive protection across your entire digital estate: identity, data, apps, endpoints, infrastructure, network. So I'm sure you guys know this, but we actually offer over 50 categories in terms of security solutions. We offer the endpoint protection, forensic tools, anti-phishing, sandboxing, apps, isolation, device isolation, and I can go on and on for the next half an hour. My point here is that through our solutions, we offer customers single pane of glass for the third-party infrastructure. For example, as I said before, Defender for Cloud, you get AWS, Google Cloud Platform, and you can identify and prioritize security risks holistically. For Defender for Endpoint, it's compatible across all of the vendors, right? macOS, Linux, Android, iOS, you name it, we can do it, which of course will help you to reduce the attack surface. For Defender for Cloud Apps, connectivity from the Microsoft stack, and then connection of your third-party apps, so we can see everything in one place. Active Directory, identity management, that provides, regardless where you are at on your cloud journey, you'll be using SaaS, IaaS, PaaS. So we help you with that integration, and we offer on-prem and app custom-built apps in there through app application registration, and then Endpoint Manager as well. You can manage all the existing OSs. I think that's our approach. We want to get everything together. Let's work together. Not because you're using a Mac, it's not like, no, I don't want you. No, come in here. I've got the right tools for you, and we'll help you, and we'll develop these to make the end user experience great, because it's all about experiences.
Fab. Anyone else got any questions for Jose? Fab. Okay. We'll look to close then, I think. Firstly, panel, thank you. Jose, thank you for joining us. I think we could have probably spent a lot longer on this, and we might do a follow-up topic about a couple of different areas. But I think one of the key things that resonate today, and I think if marketing have had time, they've got a slide they can just ping up just to add some use for everyone listening, and also for you guys on the call. One of the key things I think that came out of today was, most of you seem to be navigating towards enabling as many of these services as possible, but actually there's a real confusion as to, or even lack of understanding of what is there, right? So what's there? Microsoft are renowned for renaming their products, right? And there's been a lot of that over the last 12 months or so. I mean, some of it you could argue is right. It's about aligning things to the right names, but people come to love things. New things get announced. People don't know if they're new or not. So I think there's definitely how do we get a good update as to what's in what from a licensing perspective. We'll share some notes in the chat after this call, but also just how do you get some information. So anybody, this includes the panel, anyone listening, pretty much every customer of Microsoft, if you're paying commercial or public sector customer, then you're eligible for what Microsoft called, they keep changing the name of these as well, but what they refer to as Cloud Accelerator workshops, which are funded workshops from Microsoft, so fully paid, delivered by your Microsoft partner. So we of course can deliver these for you, that will walk through various aspects of the Microsoft security stack. So everything from a general open, what is it, what's in the box, what have you got, answer questions, through to 4 kind of CISO level workshops, which are quite extensive engagements, again all funded, where we can do full security assessments for you, threat analysis, those kind of things, walk through trials and pilots, all delivered through partner, all delivered and funded by Microsoft. So if there are things that you're interested in, I think there's a page that we're going to stick up with a QR code that will just give you a bit more information about those workshops. But speak to your Microsoft account manager, speak to us. If you don't work with us, then how dare you? Why not? But no, if not, talk to your existing Microsoft partner as well. Obviously, they'll be able to help you. On that note, I'd like to thank everyone for joining. Team, thank you as always. You're always the star of these shows. I've got the easiest bit as always. Jose, thank you, and we hope to see you all on the next show next month.
Yeah, hopefully. Thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks all.
Everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.